You're a mom, and Steph says these same things. It's like, how do I be the mom, but also be a wife, but also just be myself? I feel like not all three are allowed
and
simultaneously.
be a teacher, the
And then be a professional
chauffeur,
teacher.
the school nurse, in charge of all the extracurricular activities, the coach, the psychologist,
Well, I
you
said
name
that. I
it.
said, I said,
Yes.
I said, mom. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you thought that was funny.
Yep, that's right.
So happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, because this is coming out.
That's right. Happy Mother's
love-
Day to each of
I
you.
did. That's what your whole list. I was like, right, it's in 3 letters, mom.
Welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, where we're helping you thrive in your homeschooling journey. I'm Zan Tyler, and I'm joined by my producer, Caleb. Today, we're reviewing some viral clips and timely news. We hope these conversations encourage you and equip you for your journey. If they bless you, we'd love for you to share them with a friend and subscribe so you never miss what's next. So, we have a first clip, Caleb, and we're going to talk about the good news in homeschooling right now, and then we'll get to the somber news.
Oh gosh, right out of the gates.
I interviewed this girl. She was homeschooled and didn't start reading till she was 12 years old. Now, this would send most American parents into an absolute panic. But she was like, I wasn't ready. I wanted to horseback ride. I wanted to do these other activities. By the time I was 12, I was like, you know what? I think I want to just start reading. And immediately she started reading. She was interested. When a kid is interested, they will learn.
Yes.
And most of my high school, so I graduated barely by the skin of my teeth, barely passed. I was just doing what it was to get by. I knew immediately that I wanted to go into this field, and I did it and killed it. I think people are just built for different things. And in a public school setting, the problem is that you're not allowing kids to find out what those things are.
I have so many thoughts. You go first, Zan.
Well, those of us who are a product of the public school are used to the fact that everybody's supposed to read at 6 years old, and nothing could be further than the truth. And especially little boys tend to read later, not always, but as one school psychologist told me, the hemisphere of their brains aren't connecting as early sometimes as little girls. And I'm quoting a school psychologist on that. And so both of my boys started reading when they were 7 years old. You would never know that they never read when they were 6 and closer to 8. And it wasn't because they had any special issues, they just weren't ready to read yet. And then Lizzie, I can remember we were starting high school with Ty. He was in the 9th grade, and this is in the early 90s, and people aren't homeschooling in high school. And I was sort of a wreck about teaching Lizzie to read, having Ty in high school. So the first thing I did was I looked at John and I said, John, you're in the 7th grade. I now pronounce you a 9th grader. And And so, in that one sentence, we skipped 2 years of education. He did great. He's an attorney now, and he did high school with Ty. And I said, Lizzie, you have a September birthday. So by law, if you were in public school, I'd hold you back a year. Why don't we start you a year late with first grade? And I thought, then I can teach her to read next year when I'm sort of over this high school trauma that I'm in right now. And she said, I am not going to be held back. And so I ordered her a curriculum that I thought would be self-teaching in some regards. And after about the first week, I check in. I say, okay, Lizzie, now it's really serious for us to get down to business and for you to start learning to read. And she said, well, let me show you what I did, Mommy. And she pulled out the teacher's manual and she said, I knew you were going to be a week late getting to me. So I just decided I would read the teacher's manual.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then she starts filling out the little things that they ask kids to do. And then she'd read the teacher's paragraph. I said, Lizzie, I'm pretty certain if you can read what the teacher's manual said, then you don't need to be doing the little fill in the blank things. She says,
Right.
oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the whole thing. I have no idea when the child learned how to read. And
Your daughter, you have no idea when your daughter, Lizzie.
No,
It just, except if someone asked you right now, I'd be like, when she was between ages of 6 and 9.
no, when she was
earlier.
between 5 and 6.
Oh, so somewhere
Because
in
when
there,
she
just picked it
started
up.
school, she wasn't even 6, and so then she was reading.
Oh my goodness.
So I don't know. And with the boys, we really worked hard at it. And I mean, they were both great readers. They just started reading a year or two late. Later. Then what? Later than what? Why do they have to read when they're 6?
Isn't they I've always found that interesting. We've got so Grayson's reading now, he's 8, and so he's reading much better than he was. He's picked it up a little slower. That's like you just said with boys, that's very normal. Um, some now he's reading chapter books on his own with us and needs help on some words. I think it's just interesting because it's probably a lot of parents who really we as a new parent with our 5 kids, we really do kind of thrive or desire or want to be we want some sort of measuring stick. You know what I mean? So it does kind of make sense. Like, when should they be reading? When should they do this? So I was going to ask you to the parents listening, when should there be a concern about, hey, should I get my child tested for dyslexia? Am I just pushing my child too hard? Because obviously, we've said on the show, you in homeschooling, of course, we want to help teach our kids perseverance, right? And like, yeah, sometimes things are hard, Lizzie. Sometimes things are hard, Grayson. It's okay. How do you know when you're just pushing too hard and you're actually pushing them in a direction that might tell them subconsciously, like, learning is terrible, right? And how do you know when, oh, they're just like, how did you find that balance? I guess is my question.
Well, so I want to tell you 2 stories first, and then I'll sort of answer your question. A friend of mine um, had a daughter who was not reading until she was somewhere between 10 and 12. And I remember her telling me the story about really pushing her. And then one day she just started reading because she was ready. And she said, I always really regretted that I pushed my daughter so hard and I was had so much anxiety over it. But as parents, we see what everybody else is doing, and it makes us nervous if our kids aren't doing the same things because we wonder if we've missed something.
Right.
I'll never forget speaking at a Capitol Day in Iowa, and this girl named Annie told me her story. And she said for years her kids had been in public school. She took them out during COVID. And she said, every year I'd tell my daughter's teacher, I think she's dyslexic. Oh, no, no, she'll grow out of it. And so the year she started homeschooling and her daughter was 9, she finally took her to a specialist, a reading specialist, who said, your daughter is severely dyslexic. And if you had brought her in years ago, I would have been able to help her much more easily. So, sometimes,
Yeah, that's what I'm really
yes,
wondering. You've traveled, you have grandchildren, so you've seen and been around so much
thousands of homeschoolers. Yes.
variances of like the unschooling and they get a bad reputation, but then the extreme academic sometimes gets a bad reputation. So all these moms and parents and dads like me, like,
Right.
and since
Right.
you've seen both sides of it, like, how do you, like, because you just brought up such a good point. Like, is it just the Holy Spirit? Is it prayer? Like, how do you know when, like, hey, I just need to back off and we need to take a few days off and just play and let these kids run around versus, no, it's time to get something scheduled on the book so I can, like, what do you do?
Okay, well, I have to say, I love that you said, "Is it prayer and the Holy Spirit?" Because I say yes and yes, and I really
Okay.
do believe that the Holy Spirit, God, is our superintendent of education, and He is flawless in that role.
So we got some fun stuff in the news. I'm excited for when this type of news article is no longer news. It's just normal, which would be very cool. But this hits close to home. It's Colorado. A homeschool team wins the state science Olympiad tournament. Is that how you say that? Olympiad? Olymp.
Olympiad, I think.
Let me try again. The homeschool team wins state science
Olympiad.
Olympiad.
See, you're a successful businessman, and you're still having struggles
Okay.
reading, so
Okay. I can't. Anyways, yeah, talk to us about this. This is cool. Um, Long story short, there's a statewide science tournament. There's middle school, there's high school, and some homeschoolers took home the championship this year.
That's right, and they're headed, their middle school program and high school program, they're headed to the nationals, which
Let's
is
go.
pretty exciting. And I think when you look at some of the interviews in this article with the students, they talk about how much they love being with the team, the teamwork, they're their best friends, they have a joint mission. So I would say, everybody benefits from collaboration in learning, and that has certainly happened with these homeschool kids. They have a great coach. They love the socialization aspect of it, but we shouldn't be surprised that these kids are doing so well. These are kids who love STEM. They have plenty of time in their school day to devote to this. I think it's great news.
I did think it was interesting. They said this is a unique challenge for homeschoolers. Homeschool students had to adapt to strict deadlines and collaborative work skills not always emphasized in homeschooling. At first, I got defensive, and then I was like, "That's a completely fair statement."
Well,
Because in my circle, there's like everything else we've talked about. Like, hey, you learn at your pace. But if you're in a tournament, that it's
that's
this.
right.
There's deadlines. Like this is and not. It's interesting. They said it's a unique challenge for homeschoolers because then you read the article, and this high school team has won 3 years in a row. So clearly they are figuring out how to deal with deadlines if they won 3 years in a row.
Well, that was one thing. There were no co-ops around when my boys were in high school, but Lizzie was in a co-op, and one of the great values, just besides the being with her friends, was the one of the great values was just learning how to hit deadlines, and they were immovable. That's the one thing that was easy for me to constantly move in homeschooling was, well, we were out of town this week. We'll just turn it in. We'll finish this assignment the next week. And when the boys had a science class and a Spanish tutor, it was nice in helping them get ready for college just because it took me out of the loop and they had deadlines they had to meet for somebody else. So I do think there's some real benefit in that. And one of the girls talked about building lifelong friendships. And you do that when you're in a team that really coalesces like that.
And you've said many times, like, so this specifically was science. Um, but you've also said there's been a lot of cool stuff in STEM in general, speech and debate, 4-H clubs, sports teams. I'm a home. I should get video and we can put on the podcast. So I coach a homeschool soccer league, and you haven't lived until you see a homeschool soccer league. Um, but in Colorado Springs, in this league, there's gosh, 300 kids maybe. Or your friend Barb helped start or
Yes,
started it and
yes.
still helps and
Uh-huh.
still runs it. There's hundreds of kids and they're competitive. They show up to play. Granted, sometimes half my team is in shorts, shin guards, cleats, ready to go, and the other half of the team is in jeans, tennis shoes, and a Pikachu hoodie. So you know what I mean? Like, but they are still learning, and like it's so interesting because it's non-competitive, but every kid has that innate nature, like, "I wanna win," and so the team still gets disappointed if they lose. Even if parents don't keep track, they keep track of the score. So, I just think it's important that people understand you just gotta be involved as a parent, and there are so many options now. As you had said, like, you didn't have those, then now most school districts, in my understanding, you can actually play on the public school teams if that's what you want for your kid. I believe we had some homeschoolers on my team in high school, in terms of if you wanna do football or soccer or basketball, there's also upward basketball.
Yep, and
Um,
there are tons of homeschool leagues now that are offering competitive sports. And I know my grandson, both all three of my grandsons compete in a homeschool basketball league, and it has really been a fabulous experience.
Morning routine of a stay-at-home mom who homeschools and lives in an RV full-time. Now, I'm not the only one, but nobody can talk to me unless I get my dose of coffee in the morning because I just needed to wake me up, revive me, and get me ready. So first things first, I have a homeschool rolling cart, and I created this just so I have all the basic necessities right beside us, and it's very easily accessible for my daughter to grab and go. We start the morning off with our Bible study, and this is very important because we are a Christian-based home, and we want to incorporate this as much as we can. When my daughter's working, I go over all of our schedule. Now, this isn't anything fancy. This is just something I've learned online because I've done a lot of research and I'm new to homeschooling. So basically, I schedule everything out. She goes to school for 185 days just as a regular school, and then I map out all of our curriculums and divide them into 5 days of school. My daughter is currently in second grade, so we did actually do a schedule to kind of stick to what we'd be doing for the whole day. Obviously, it is going to change up a little bit because she's a kid. This is my year overview. I have 3 weeks on, 1 week off because we're going to be going to school all year round. And I know it looks a little messy right now, but I do plan to create printables so I can make everything a little bit more organized.
what a rock star.
That is really amazing. I think the main takeaway from this is we don't even know if she's using her RV as a place to live or if she's actually traveling in her RV and doing what people call RV schooling.
Yeah, road schooling.
Yeah, road
RV
schooling.
school, road, you're
That's right.
totally.
And, but there's so many. I mean, if she is RVing, I have so many friends, Lanissa James and so many others who have done the RVing. Mike Knott owns an RV, and they've spent a lot of time in their RV, and it's a great experience for the kids. I mean, it really does show that the world is your classroom when you
Oh, yeah.
homeschool.
These comments are just encouraging. I like your very simple schedule and calendar. Perfect. I mostly love that your Bible reading study is first.
Mhm.
Same in our household. In theory,
Absolutely.
there are times I forget, and I apologize, Lord. But it is, I love this. I'm embarking on my homeschool journey and in a small home. I was stressed about the space to do so. This gives me hope. Thank you. My kids are grown now, but the days of simple workbooks for my son were so great. Was able to use block scheduling through high school as well. Great job, Mama. A fellow homeschooling mom of 5. Love the cart and order. It's just so much. Like these are the. There's a lot of days, and I hate the internet, and I wish it didn't exist.
Oh, yeah,
But
I
then you have
know.
moments like this that you're like, how awesome. She throws this up there, and it's all these other moms that are like, man, this is encouraging, giving me ideas. I thought the rolling cart was really cool. Um,
Yes, yes. When I would have to take the boys into the public school system to have them take standardized tests every year, I would roam the halls some and I would get so depressed because this was an affluent school district. And I would see the cafeteria and the stage they use for drama and the art projects and the little science labs for younger children. And I would get so depressed. And I just remember asking the Lord, how can I really how can I give them the same level of education? And the main thing I learned from all of that as I really reflected is that facilities don't educate. People do. And that was it, it was just like the Lord said, Zan, I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you that the Bible is the focal point of your home. You want your kids to know Christ. And then when Lizzie was ready for drama, we had a community theater where there was a Christian director. She had all those outlets. The boys had sports outlets that were unbelievable. They grew up at the state house, so in many ways that was their schoolroom, and then we traveled some, and so we didn't have those billion-dollar facilities, but the Lord gave us the world as our classroom.
that's right. That's right. And anytime I hear you, kind of say things like that, or even see something like this, it just kind of gives me that much more kind of encouragement.
And I'm going to be doing Jenny Yurch's podcast
Oh, fun.
tomorrow, 1,000 hours outside, and let me just tell you, there's nothing as gorgeous as the outdoors for a classroom.
Oh my gosh. How many times, because you raise boys, and the weather here we think is finally changing. In Colorado, they call spring sprinter. And I get it because I'm not exaggerating. 2 weeks ago, it was like 81 degrees and sunny outside all day. The next day, no exaggeration, snow. And so,
Well, that's right. I was just there for their Capital Day,
oh yeah,
and we
you were
had a
here.
gorgeous day, but the week before, they said they had snow, 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 so
It snowed yesterday. And so we're still like getting used to it. But man, when you're inside a lot and then suddenly there's an opening and then your kids, how wild is it that then the kids can actually be outside for a full day? And it just kind of floods you like, oh yeah, we're not designed to like be in a facility or in a home. Like you don't even have to scientifically prove it, even though there's a ton of science out there of vitamin D, the healthy, the UV rays, all that kind of stuff. When you're removed from that for an extended period of time, everyone's cranky, you can't focus, learning is incredibly difficult. Yeah, 100%. So
this podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com.
So for some news that's not as exciting necessarily in the fun sense, Zan, about homeschool kids taking home the championship, we have some stuff that's happening across the nation. This particular one is Connecticut. Why don't you kind of fill us in what's been happening, what
Okay.
you've seen happen, what's
So I
going on?
have on my homeschool freedom earrings.
Let's go.
so, so I'm ready to talk about homeschool freedom. I'm actually always ready to talk about homeschool freedom. We have had a disturbing trend this winter and spring in terms of homeschool freedom. Let me just back up and say, as during COVID, as the numbers of homeschoolers exploded, people would say to me, why do you still talk about homeschooling freedom? With so many people homeschooling, nobody's ever going to bother us. And my response was, I mean, first of all, you learn that freedom is never free. It always comes with a price tag. And that the only reason evil triumphs is when good men do nothing. And so freedom, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And so we're seeing that play out now. I felt like the more people that homeschooled, the bigger target we have on the back because we're threatening school districts, and there's schools that have closed or merged because there's so many homeschoolers and pension funds and everything else for teachers.
Some
So,
quick numbers for that, and then you take it because I pulled them up while you're going.
okay.
2019, we had roughly 2.5 million, so that's about 3% of the school age population. The numbers are coming in through early 20 or late 2024 into 2025. It's now up past 3.7 million, so that's a 1.2 million increase. And they're actually expecting it to increase to the point where it's 10% of total student population will be homeschooled, up from 3% just 5 years ago.
And I've seen numbers that are higher than that, but I think definitely those numbers you read are the conservative estimate of how many homeschoolers there are. And so there's strength in numbers. There's a lot of support in numbers, but there isn't. It doesn't mean we'll never have any attacks on freedom. So this year, during this legislative session, we've had 4 states who have had true threats to homeschool freedom. This has not happened in a couple of decades. First, there was Virginia, and their religious exemption status was threatened. It was a real threat. It took a whole Callie Chaplow and her whole team there, Ann Miller. It took months for them to fight this bill with HSLDA and come out the victor. The sponsor of the bill says, hang around, I'll be back next year. So we'll see what happens. Then there was Illinois, which had one of the freest laws in the country. And out of nowhere, there was a bill that was a threat to their freedom. You can go to iche.org for more information. That's the Illinois Christian Home Educators Association run by Kirk Smith. I just had an email from Kirk today. So they were going from no regulations to having a situation where people would have to sign up with your district to homeschool. If you miss the deadline by 30 days, you could be criminally prosecuted. I mean, this was amazing. And, and then there were several other things to follow in terms of regulations. There were like 7,000 people that showed up at the Illinois State House. So the session is about to come to an end. And Kirk said today that he is truly optimistic that it won't pass because there's not enough time left in the session for it to pass. But it shows that out of nowhere, these threats to freedom come. Minnesota had a threat to freedom. You can look that up on their website. I'm going to give you URLs in our show notes because if you are in these states, you need to be involved with your state organization. fighting for good homeschooling legislation to prevail. And then just on Monday, Caleb, you sent me this article from Connecticut. I was flying home from a conference in New Mexico, so I missed it. You wanna lay the groundwork?
So Connecticut did have a very unfortunate story. We don't have to go deep into it. Obviously, a man, a full grown man, was found who had been trying to essentially get out of his house, and I think he was over 30 years old, um, basically held against his will by his mother, and that prompted this big kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, Zan,
Outcry.
anti-homeschool out. There
Yes.
you go, outcry. So, and it seemed that the focus of attention wasn't on Child Protective Services as much, or the community speaking out, and or even that kind of stuff. There has been a lot of poignant conversation, specifically that this mother said she was a homeschool mom and she didn't do anything wrong. Those are her words, by the way, not mine. So that has prompted a lot of this. And I don't know if they're just kind of using it as the latchkey, or they're just using it as kind of the ignition to get across an agenda that they actually want. But that has been, from we've been reading, especially in Connecticut, that's been kind of the stir. Like, okay, how could this happen? Can homeschoolers do this? Are homeschoolers really just abused kids being locked up in their so fast forward to now, there's now this bill that I don't fully understand, so maybe you could kinda just educate us more. What is being presented in Connecticut, and why are so many, they said there's, so this says over 2,100 homeschoolers are at the legislative office building against
Okay.
this, which is a lot of people. So
Okay.
clearly this is affecting homeschool. Why don't you
So
tell us
I
what's going
talked
on?
I talked to Donna Person today, who is, I think, the executive director with Teach Connecticut, TEACHCT.org, if you want to look it up. She told me that on Monday there were well over 4,000 homeschoolers there at the State House. I've seen this dozens of times, where there's this red herring situation to use to try to regulate homeschoolers. From everything I've read, the attorneys I've talked to, they said that there was this child, which is awful. Let me just go on the record as saying, I don't know of one homeschooling family that's in favor of child abuse, but there are child abuse laws and truancy laws on the books to prevent this type of thing. And the child advocacy department, I'm not getting Connecticut has its own name for that. They were aware of this situation and visited them several times over the 5 years the child was in public school, and it just somehow fell through the cracks. Now he's 32 years old. He set his room on fire, evidently. They found him. He weighed 68 pounds. Well, let me just tell you, none of us thinks that's okay. It is
No,
not okay. But
nor is
let
that
me
homeschooling.
and
That's
that
not,
is not homeschooling. That's
that's
right.
abuse.
Yeah, and they had a chance to fix that in his first 5 years of school. And so, nobody's in favor of that. Connecticut actually has a situation where in their constitution from 1650, parents are given the responsibility of instructing their children or giving the instruction to someone else to do. So then in 1850, the compulsory attendance law passed there. And so still they viewed that as, if you don't want to instruct your children yourselves, as their constitution says, that you send your kids to school. And so they've been very, very free in terms of homeschooling, in terms of the requirements, because it's provided for in the Constitution. And now they called for this hearing. It was a public hearing in the sense that people could attend, but it wasn't a public hearing for two legislative committees, because citizens could not respond. People were only requested to testify, and they had no people there representing homeschoolers who are advocating for freedom. So we are always advocating for parental rights. And so I just want to encourage you. If you see this coming to your state, you need to know what your law is. You need to know the issues. You need to be involved in your state homeschooling organization, and you need to go to your Capitol Day. Need to get to know your your legislator. Homeschool freedom is something that we are all responsible for. You can't leave it up to somebody else.
Just to piggyback, it says the information. So they called this an informational hearing. So what they're doing is political gymnastics. So they're not actually proposing a bill. Instead, what they want to do is create mandates that will actually be shoehorned into the upcoming state budget, which
That's
is
right.
very. There's a word for that, and I'm not political enough. Maybe you know what it is, but it's basically like, okay, if the right way to do something is propose a bill that people can all read, and then the House and the Senate will vote on it, and then the governor of the state will sign it into law. Because that takes too long, sometimes there's these tricky ways you can and that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to make it part of the budget bill, which is different. And I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that's maybe how they're able to, since it's not a formal bill, that's how they're able to add these extra rules like, okay, you can't just sign up and give us your opinion. Okay, it says they only allowed 7 people to speak. They chose them, and they chose 5 experts just to speak on why homeschooling needs to be heavily regulated, and they only allowed 2 people to present a contrary opinion. So this whole thing is kind of gerrymandered to force a one-sided opinion.
Yeah,
Continue.
that's right. That's right. They did not give constituents the freedom to speak and give their point of view. And so it will be interesting to see what happens legislatively. In South Carolina, we call it bobtailing a bill when you just attach a bill to something that it has nothing else to do with. And every state probably
Thank you, that's what it's called, yeah.
yeah, so every state may call it something different, but they really, I mean, they have been very, very free in Connecticut. And now they're saying they're using this one situation of abuse to say we need to come in and regulate all homeschoolers.
The one homeschooler they allowed to speak just spoke against homeschooling. So basically, homeschooling got not only not a fair shot, but I don't even know what you'd call that. Like this whole situation was coalesced to present an anti why homeschooling is dangerous, and then they cherry picked certain people from the homeschooling
That's
community
exactly
who were
right.
actually against it.
So there are a couple of Supreme Court decisions that we need to be aware of. And so hang on, we'll put these in the show notes, but I want to read them to you just so you understand we have footing for fundamental rights in this country and parental rights. The fundamental theory of liberty upon which all governments in this union repose excludes any general power of the state to standardize its children by forcing them to accept instruction from public teachers only. The child is not the mere creature of the state. Those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare him for additional obligations. Now, that's from Pierce versus the Society of Sisters in 1925. Here's another case. I just want to read you a couple of sentences from Parham versus JR. And this was in 1979, another Supreme Court decision. And it says the statist notion that governmental power should supersede parental authority in all cases because some parents abuse and neglect children is repugnant to American tradition. Do you see that? You can't take this one situation, as heinous and awful as it is, and say, now we've got to protect all homeschooling families. When did parents become the enemy? That's the question I want to ask. Parents have never been considered the enemy in this country until the last generation or two. Parents are not the enemies. And the Supreme Court validates that.
Is there a fighting chance? Of course. Their voices, I mean, they're still rallying, they're still getting, and as you said, your friend that runs the state homeschool, the Christian Homeschool Alliance coalition there is obviously very involved.
Yes.
Um, and
And
so the best we can do, I mean, if we don't live in Connecticut, step 1, pray. Step 2, whatever state you do live in, I'm in Colorado, I've got friends in California. You really need to be involved. Get on their email list, whatever. Check in with their website once a month. Um, your state homeschool organization.
yes.
And if Zan, if they wanted to get a list of those, because I know when you start searching your own state, you might land at someplace that is not really where you want to be.
Okay.
Like I
There
know ours is Czech, I know California's Chia, but where's a good spot where you can just kind of find all of them?
So there's a website, homeschoolfreedom.com, and it will tell you how to find your state organization. and to get involved with them. You can also go to hslda.org, and they will have a place where you can find your state organization, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, hslda.org. And so then you want to find out what's going on in your state. Like Caleb said, sign up for their e newsletter, social media, however you want to keep in touch with them. Understand your state law, get to know your legislator. We need to do a whole podcast on
We
that.
really should.
And make sure you're in touch with how freedom is going in your state, because like I say, we've never had 4 states that have good
Yeah.
homeschool laws threatened at this level in, I would say, 2 decades, maybe longer than that.
I think we're seeing a sway because so I'm a West Coast Christian. I know you're an East Coast Southern Christian. So we have very different we've talked about this. I grew up Pentecostal. You asked me if I ever touched snakes. I didn't know what you were even talking about because right, so our lenses are different. Like, and I'm sure people listening, their lenses are going to be different. You might be in a state you think is really free. Ironically, California is known for being a the most liberal progressive state, maybe rivaling New York. California currently is one of the top states to homeschool in terms of ease because we did it there. It was like, oh, and then there's some that are in the middle, but you have to know. You have to do these researches. And as much as let's be honest, as much as we want to sit on the sidelines and be like, hey, politics doesn't affect me, you know, I'm conservative every 4 years. I check the R boxes down the ballot. Like I know these people. Like you have to care and have to be involved. And I think there's been this general air of, especially where I'm from, in the Christian communities of like, hey, we pray and what happens in the White House doesn't affect my house. What happens in the White House 100% affects your house because if you're homeschooling and these types of legislations passed and you don't actually stay on top of it, as Alex Newman has said on your show, yes, they can show up at your house. Now, will they take your kids away right away? Probably not. This is still the United States, but it has happened. And there has been people borderline harassed in this country by, I know we keep saying CPS, it's called something else, but
Well,
if you're not
it's
doing things
different
right,
things
and
in different states, yeah.
right, each state has a different,
Mhm.
and it's even kind of filed differently. But but you have to be involved. You have to know these things. If you haven't done things correctly, like in Colorado, we use check all the time because they help you make sure that you're filing correctly. The state, and a lot of people are like, no, I just don't want to tell the state anything. Want to do like this is why this matters. Like, these things matter big time. Everything Zan is talking about matters. It's not like, "Oh, that's when Zan started homeschooling. We're so grateful for what you did in South Carolina, Zan," which set a precedent. These precedents are started, then they have to be upkept. I mean, to all our listeners, all your listeners who I'd assume are believers, just open the Bible. Like, how many times are the Israelites given the most clear path forward? You're gonna sacrifice on this day. You're not gonna eat these things. And it only took half a generation, or it would take 10 years, and then it would say all of the people weren't following the Lord. They were worshiping different idols. They were inventing new ones. You know what I mean? Like, this is human nature. Like, this is, if we aren't involved and if we don't make sure we have a voice and we don't show up and we don't, write our legislator and be involved in these types of things, then 100% our rights will be taken away. And that sounds so dramatic, and people are like, "What are you talking about?" But I guarantee if any of the founding fathers could come today and see the types of things that we talk about or debate on, they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, first of all, why is the state educating any people anyways? So, but, I'll get off my soapbox. At the end of the day, we have to be involved.
All of the educational laws in terms of attendance and homeschooling come from the state level. We are hoping that the federal Department of Education or U.S. Department of Education will actually be dismantled during the next couple of years, and that real control, financial and otherwise, remains with the state.
But that's a
Every
good point you just brought up too. Right now, everything you said is true. If we don't stay involved, the federal government could grow.
That's right.
Right?
And
Like,
we want that's right. And we want government to be as local as possible, especially when it comes to things like education. But make no mistake about it, we do have enemies. There's Elizabeth Bartholet, who in 2020 called professor at Harvard called for a presumptive ban on home education. And
remember
we're
that.
seeing the fruits of this type of thing now come through Americas as homeschooling has been free. So we need to care about freedom. Freedom was God's idea. He is the author of freedom, and we need to work hard to protect our freedoms. I was threatened with jail in 1984, and my crime was loving my child and wanting to do the best for him. So you don't know what you have till it's gone, and that's why we need to really take care to preserve this freedom. Caleb, you said something really important. It's a lot easier to preserve what you have than to lose it and have to go back and have that fight all over again.
I need to tell you guys a secret. I'm a homeschool mom of young kids, and homeschooling has gotten really trendy on social media, and I think it's great. I think more people should homeschool, but they're going to be in for a shock because homeschooling is portrayed as this like really rainbows and butterflies magical type of thing, and some days it is, some days there are rainbows and butterflies, but most days it is the trenches. I am living in a war zone. My living room is always messy. My kitchen is always messy. I am constantly questioning if I'm doing this right. My 6-year-old cannot function without snacks. He has to have snacks every second of every day. He cannot do his schoolwork without snack, but he can't read with food in his mouth. And then my 4-year-old is learning so much and he's growing so much, but he is so crazy, you guys. He is so wild. My 2-year-old is into everything. She wants to be a part of our school day. I want her to be a part of our school day, but she rips all the pages and she colors on everything. And so finally, when she gets down and she's off and she's quiet, I'm like, thank goodness we can do our work. Well, guess what? She took a marker with her, and now there's marker all over my walls and all over my living room furniture, and I have to clean that up, and it is just wild.
I
Go
I
for it,
felt
Caleb.
I felt so seen. I was like, yes, every day. Like, I'll come home from, and I work from home, or mom or Steph's homeschooling right now. If I do go to the office and I come back, Steph's pretty clear. She's like, look, there's a list of 10. You can pick one. Do you want the house to be clean? Perfect. We can do that. I won't know where the children are. They might not be in our home. They might, if we want to do some schooling, no problem. We're gonna have to figure something else out for food and the house cleaning. If you would like to eat when you come home, fantastic.
Bring it with you.
Bring it with you, yeah. Which I still like. It was interesting. I thought it was funny that she said, it's all seen as sunshine and rainbows. I don't know if it's always seen like that, but I would say social media definitely highlights some of the nicer things you and I have
Yes.
talked about. Being
Yes.
outside, and now that the weather's getting good, running, going to the parks and, going places where everyone else is at school. So you have like, that is wonderful. But back to the previous thing we talked about, what about the days when your child just doesn't want to read and suddenly the crayons are everywhere? And I don't know, as a homeschool mom, do you resonate at all with any of this?
Oh, absolutely. It's just life in the trenches. And it's a different way to school. You don't have your kids sitting in rows in desks. They have a lot of freedom. You have a lot of fun. You have a lot of chaos. And in the end, you do what you need to do as a mom to to keep your
To
children at home.
and to survive.
And so
Like, I mean, you're a mom, and Steph says these same things. It's like, how do I be the mom, but also be a wife, but also just be myself? I feel like not all three
oh,
are allowed
and
simultaneously.
be a teacher, the
And then be a professional
chauffeur,
teacher.
the school nurse in charge of all the extracurricular activities, the coach, the psychologist,
Well, I
you
said
name
that.
it. Yes.
I said mom. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you thought that was funny.
Yep, that's right.
So happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, because this is coming out.
That's right. Happy
I
Mother's
love.
Day to each of
I did.
you.
That's what your whole list. I was like, right, it's in 3 letters, mom. But but it's so intense. I love these comments. Thank you so much for making this clip. The struggle is so real, and I just knew that I was the only one struggling. Thank you for honestly sharing your experience. This one's sweet too. As someone who was homeschooled their whole childhood, you have no idea how much of a positive impact y'all homeschooler moms are making on your kids. I'm so grateful for my mom, and if you're reading this now, you were just know you were doing awesome. Hard days, but wonderful ones. Amen. Thank you for being so honest. This is interesting. You aren't lying about it all being portrayed as rainbows and butterflies. I've searched YouTube high and low to find other homeschool moms who struggle with things like this from time to time because I wanted to feel less alone and found practically nothing. Thankful to have stumbled across your lighthearted video for a bit of reassurance that that things like this are common and it isn't just me.
Hey,
This is
Caleb.
very
Oh,
sweet.
go ahead.
Yeah. I was just that's it. It's sweet.
As we close, I just want to remind you if you need help with your homeschooling, you can reach out to our consultants who are moms
Yes.
just like you. Some have 10 children, some have 2 children, but all of them have lived life in the trenches as homeschool moms. You can find them at homeschoolhelp.com/map and look at your state and find a consultant there to help you on those days when you feel like you want to pull your hair out, scream,
There you
and
go. Right
quit.
there. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today.
And thank
Sorry,
you.
I hijacked your goodbye. I heard you were like, those are my words.
I love it when you do that. I do.
So I'll do it.
Okay, you
No,
do
yeah.
it.
What was the last thing you were going to say?
I was going to take issue with one thing you said. I did not ask you if you handled snakes.
Yeah, you did.
I did.
No. I said I went to a Foursquare Pentecostal church. That's where I was saved. You know what? It could have been Joe.
Yes.
Joe may have said, "You
yes.
touched the snakes," and I was like,
yes,
"The
that
snakes."
that was not I. Okay.
Thank you for being with us today on the Zan Tyler podcast, Thriving in Your Homeschool. Please subscribe wherever you are right now. In fact, you should just stop doing what you're doing. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe, leave a comment, go share it with someone. If you're on Apple, please leave us a review on Apple. It helps the podcast a lot, pushes it up in the algorithm so other people can find this helpful and inspirational. And if you don't like the show, don't tell us. We just, we're looking for 5-star reviews only. So like they say in homeschool, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. So just get out of here. But no, please leave us a review. Also, Zan, you have a great email list that helps people out monthly. You can sign up for that on zantyler.com.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Caleb.
Bye-bye.